All right. Welcome everyone to today's Impact Series. I'm Sneha, the host for the Impact Series. And for those in the audience that are new, I lead our business value and analytics team at Observe.AI. Today, we're going to be talking about, the great rebalancing. What does it take to design, a human and AI workforce for optimizing customer experience? And this one's a special webinar because I am joined by our co-founder and CEO, Swapnil Jain, who's my co-host today. He's a man that needs no introduction, but I'm going to pass it over to him to introduce himself and also introduce our guest expert, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks, Naya. Thanks so much. I'm Swapnil. I'm one of the founders and the CEO of Observe.AI. My background, I'm an engineer by background, but my customer experience comes from having spent roughly 6 months in Manila. So I was actually in Philippines. I would go and visit call centers. I would sit down with agents. I would sit down with managers, QA folks, right, and try to see how AI. And this is 2018. We're talking about deep learning and machine learning, how that will change the future of customer experience. So good to be here. And I'm very, very thrilled and excited to welcome Dan, who is joining us today in this great webinar. I would say more than me, Dan is the person who doesn't need any introduction in the CX space. Dan is a legend. He has been with companies, Dan, correct me, Apple, eBay, Intuit. He has built and scaled large-scale AI-driven customer experience systems at all those companies. So the phenomenal experience that you all have today with those brands, he's the person behind it. So it's exciting to have Dan today. I think we all talk about AI in theory. We all talk about AI in what could AI do. But today the focus will be what has AI done and why not. And we'll hear from Dan. So Dan, welcome to the webinar, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
All right, we'll go over some general housekeeping items before, we dive right into this topic. This session is being recorded. Feel free to put in your questions in the Q&A section at any time. We'll try our best to answer as many questions as we can. If we're not able to, we'll follow up with resources. And because this is recorded, you will receive the recording post this session. Okay, so let's dive right into it. So as we talked about this, we're going to talk about the great rebalancing. We're here to map out what customer experience is going to look like 4 or 5 years from now. But more than that, we actually want to understand, how do we bridge the gap between the AI hype that we're hearing and the operational reality of what you're managing today, right? And for the C-suite, I think the conversations have changed. It's no longer about cutting costs through automation. It's deciding what portions of your customer experience do you want to give your AI agents to handle, and what portions of those are too valuable to lose human touch. And we're already seeing the market shift here, right? From chatbots that talk to agents that can action. So at this point in time, if you don't have a framework on how these two can operate together by 2030, you're not just going to be behind on technology. You are losing your connection to your customers. And we know that, chatbots and voice bots have existed for a long time. What's changed is probably the capability, the expectations. The way I see it, like, customers now assume instant responses, but leaders also have the responsibility to defend the trust, the safety, the outcomes. So I want to kick this off with a question to you, Dan, and that's from your vantage point. Across all these consumer brands, what have you seen fundamentally change about AI in CX, what it is today versus what it used to be over the past few years?
Yeah, if you look at just the last 24 months, because it's changed a lot, even outside of that. But specifically, I mean, just even 2 years ago, the word AI was being used just as often, but it meant something really different. 2 years ago, most AI and customer experience was intent-based. A customer says something, system classifies it, what they probably want. You get a canned response, and it either succeeds or it transfers off to a person. Interaction had no memory, no ability to reason about context, no capacity to act on connected systems, and right, very deliberate on the integration work. What changed, and I think it happened way faster than most organizations were ready for, is the underlying models became capable of something much closer to reasoning, right? It can hold a full conversation in context. It can reconcile conflicting information mid-interaction. It can draft a response. It can check it against a policy. It can adjust it and deliver in a way that feels coherent to the customer, right? That's not what the NLP of 2022 is doing. right? The second change is the systems can do things beyond that conversation, right? Agentic AI, AI taking action across systems, right? It's real in production and doing that in organizations now. Means AI just doesn't tell a customer when the delivery will arrive. It can reschedule it. It can update notification preferences. It can log that interaction. It can complete a transaction. That capability didn't exist and didn't exist at scale. And I think it's the third change is the one that's really underappreciated is what it does to the cost model. When AI can resolve meaningful percentage of contacts end to end, the conversation isn't about what can we deflect more calls or contact for order rate. It's like, you know, it becomes a much more of a board conversation of not the speed of capability improvements, but changing those governance frameworks. What do you have to do about quality assurance models, training programs, change management, right? Leaders who understand that gap and close it deliberately, right, are the ones who be able to pull ahead. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. And question for you, Swapnil, just based off of what Dan said too. I think you're in conversations with, executives and leaders almost every day, people who are trying to make sense of this, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at, the forward-looking vision for customer experience for contact centers, what's the biggest shift that you're seeing in the market right now that tells you that the old way of running a contact center is officially over?
Yeah, I would say I always think of business as an enterprise, follow a little bit of what happens on the consumer side. And I think what tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude, and so on have done is made millions and hundreds of millions of consumers and people sitting in these enterprises very comfortable with what this technology could do. So now when you come to me and say, hey, you know what, your customer experience should be seamless, should be conversational, should sound natural. I'm like, yeah, of course. I do that with ChatGPT all the time. I understand it.
Yeah.
So you don't have that bridge of, let me talk about this future thing that is very hard to explain. It's almost the other way, right? Because now as a consumer, let's say I'm a VP at a large enterprise, because I'm experiencing ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini every single day, I start thinking, is this the consumer experience I'm providing to my customers? And so that thing has changed. We moved away from a push model where you're telling a business that, hey, there's a new way to do customer service and customer experience, to now a model where they are asking questions. As you said, the board, the C-suite, everybody's asking the question that why is our customer service or customer experience not as conversational and seamless like the experience with ChatGPT is? So I would say that's been the biggest shift. We have moved out of this world of education to now a pull-based model where everybody's looking forward to what these tools can do to improve customer service and customer experience. And I think the biggest question they have, I would say two biggest questions that everyone has now. One is, where do they start? Because it could feel overwhelming. I mean, especially, you often hear these utopian or very dystopian views on AI all the time. AI will kill this, AI will eat this, right? That's all you hear. And then these VPs and CXOs are like, okay, I get all that, but what problems can I solve in my customer service today? Can we talk about that? And second thing that they struggle with and they need help with, right, is the balance of, okay, I get that AI will help improve my customer service and customer experience, but what will AI do? How much will AI do? And what will human do? And how much will human do? So I think those two questions I feel are still a little open for a lot of enterprises. I think the question that is closed is, hey, is the future going to be different? Yes. Is LLM going to fundamentally change customer service? Yes. So there's no debate there anymore.
Yeah. And I think a common theme in both what you and Dan mentioned is, one, we have to start thinking differently about, approaching what customer service and customer experience is going to be. Dan, you touched upon, the decision rights, the framework that goes into this, the ownership, accountability. And Swapnil, I think you asked the most important question, right? Where do I start? And I think that goes back to understanding, how do you make the decision? And today, the way we're seeing it is, you have these fully autonomous agents, and you also have, AI assisted or augmentative agents.
Yeah.
And this is going to be the future workforce. But when we talk about autonomous and augmentative agents, these are essentially, instead of treating it as agents, we now need to treat it as deployment modes or deployment models, right? So the same intent can be fully automated. Some people could, decide that they need that to be AI assisted with a human led. So what actually goes into the decision making between what needs to be autonomous, what needs to be augmentative? How do we leverage the best of all the different, agentic models that we have today to drive that? I think, Dan, we would love to hear your view on, what's the spectrum of the decision making that goes into this.
Yeah, I think, for me, the core question is really not what AI can do, but it's what decision authority AI should have. And those are two different questions, because AI can do a lot. It's what should you let it? And for me, it's really about that framework and decision rights. And there's one that I use and I recommend, and it's really breaking it down to three classes. And those three classes are deterministic, judgment required, and high stakes. Let me explain that in a little bit more detail. For me, deterministic, let's talk about the impact of that, right? The impact is low. Mistakes can be easily contained and easily reversed, and decisions are rules based, right? Predictable outcomes, and AI can decide it autonomously. It's very rules based, very simple, like data validation, routine routing. That's something that's very simple. An example would be a return request. Return request comes in, it's inside the 30-day window. AI can say, yes, it's in policy, it's not in policy, right? FedEx return package, FedEx routing, UPS routing. Those are simple things. That's a very deterministic flow. AI can do that all day. Very simple, autonomous decision. Right? Second one, judgment required. The impact of that could be material. The outcome changes someone's experiences, their access, their treatment. The decision is ambiguous, right? Trade-offs, context matters, right? This is where AI should recommend, but a human should decide. Customer escalations, refund exceptions, right? Account restrictions. If you're going to restrict somebody's account, those kind of things, then you should have, right? AI can take it to a certain point, but then you need to have a human review, right? Let's say you have an account. Let's use a marketplace. Let's like eBay. You have an account and it's flagged for potential fraud. You may not want to have the AI make that complete decision. You want to get to a point and say, okay, hey, we think this is fraud, right? If it's clearly fraud, by the policy, everything else, sure. Maybe fraud. You want to have a human review that. So that's that second class, that judgment required, right? Maybe there's a bunch of unusual logins, IP addresses in a foreign country, those kind of things. It's like, okay, yeah, this looks like fraud. So you want to have a person review that kind of evidence. That's class 2. Class 3, high stakes, financial, legal, ethical, health consequences, very hard to undo, right? The second order effects, compliance exposures, right? Those kind of things. You probably don't want to let AI do much in there. You might want to have AI compile some information, but you definitely want to have a human own that. AI may inform it, but you want to have a human own that complete decision. Healthcare decisions, there may be a major fine involved, right? AI model may recommend declining a mortgage application, right? But a human underwriter is going to look at that and make that final decision, right? For autonomous, right? The AI has to have paths to resolutions clear. Data has to be accessible, right? And that's one of the big things, especially when you talk about that autonomous versus augmented. A lot of the challenge in today's world is all the data is not accessible, right? Especially in large companies, the data is not ready, right? AI may be ready, but the data is not ready for that. So the data needs to be accessible, needs to be ready. The consequence of error is bounded and correctable. Those routine transactions, status inquiries, that's it. Augmented, where AI supports. Emotional stakes are high, right? Let's take something, especially emotional stakes. Let's take something as simple as, right, that class 1 example of a return request or a cancellation. Let's say this is something where we need to cancel an account, right? Very clear policy. But let's say it's someone who passed away and it's the widow who's calling in. Yes, that's something where the system could easily do that. But you sense that this is because, right, the AI senses this is the widow calling in. AI could do that. You probably don't want to. So there's some of these things where you have to go beyond just what is the situation and understand beyond just the situation, what are the other things you need to take into account. So it's always not clearly class 1, class 2, class 3. You need to understand the context around the situation to make those decisions to whether it's autonomous or augmented. So mistake most organizations make is draw that line of complexity. Stakes, trust, reversibility, and emotion.
Lovely. Then that's a great framework. I think we should write a blog on that, and start educating more and more people on that. I think, if I can add to that, I'll maybe view it more from a customer side, right? Which is, we as consumers, we call our banks and telcos and airlines for help all the time. We send emails, we do chat with them, right? And I think I love the point which you mentioned, which is one is what can AI do this? I think we obviously talk a lot about that and models and data and things like that. And I think there's the other part of it, like, do you actually want AI to be doing this? Right? And one of the key elements of that is the human experience or the human expectations, right? And my view on that is, to your point, view some of the examples, right? As consumers, when I'm calling in to say, hey, my refund is delayed, or my return this for me, right? I actually have no expectation of any form of empathy. I have no expectation of someone giving me a long explanation or telling me how sorry they are. All I care about is just return the product, right? If I can say that. It's like, get it done, right? But there is a world of things that I call in for where I feel like I can use some empathy, right? For example, to your point, I get this bill from my health insurer, right? It's like, hey, you have this like $5,000 copay. I'm like, whoa, 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 right? Like, where is this coming from? It's complex. It has huge financial implications for me. $5,000 out of pocket. Where am I going to get that? Right. And that, even if AI could solve for me, I actually don't want to talk to AI. I
Yeah.
actually want to talk to somebody who
Yes.
understands my situation, my personal situation, who understands healthcare complexity in America, who understands out of pocket is very hard for middle class people, right? And so on and so forth. So I think there is that human element that I feel like, going back to the point of what should be done by AI and what should be done by human customer service agents, there's an element of, do you really want this call, chat, email to be handled by human or AI? And you have to use this customer framework in there, or the customer reference, that do you really want to do this? And there's lots of examples of that. I mean, the healthcare bill, I think you gave a bunch of sensitive examples, right? So I think the framework there I have is like, is the customer just wants to resolve their problem, or there's an expectation of empathy and understanding,
Yeah.
and giving comfort. I don't want any comfort when I'm calling in to return my Amazon order. Just get it done, my friend.
Yes.
Just return it and move on. It's a $20 product.
Yeah.
But if it's a $2,000 bill, come on. I want some comfort that you're going to take care of it.
Definitely. No, that's exactly it. That empathy component is extremely important. And in today's world, AI is not there. Now, may it get there at some point? Who knows? In the next 5 years, it might. But at this point, AI can't do empathy.
I think there's this one more angle to it, right? Which is like, the whole notion of AI and empathy, right? And I think it's going to change with generation. So let's say AI is phenomenal, right? It can sound really empathetic, but you and I know, Dan, that
Yeah.
it's a machine. What are you
Uh,
talking about? It's a
yeah.
machine. How could machine be empathetic?
Yeah.
The machine does not understand my life. The machine does not understand the pains I go through, right? The machines cannot do that. So I also feel there's a little bit of generational shift that needs to happen.
Definitely.
Maybe it's the newer generation which will grow up using chat gpt and these things as their, if I can say, therapist or
Yeah.
counselor, or an invisible friend who knows everything and who's supporting them through their life. And they're like, wow, AI is so empathetic. And then when they talk about customer service, they're completely fine
Yeah.
with AI doing the empathy. But I mean, if you ask me,
No.
this generation, I'm like, how can AI be empathetic? Or it's a machine. I'm not used to doing that. So I think there's also that shift
Most definitely.
that we will see.
That's a
Most definitely, I
great
agree.
point. Yeah, I never thought about the generational shift, and it is true. Like this generation is going to grow up with, interacting with machines. So their understanding of what empathy looks like versus like the older generation, that's going to be very different.
Well, and it's even that way from, contact center channel thing. It's a big discussion we used to have at eBay a lot when you look at, the population who uses eBay and the channels you offer. And, it's like when you look at this, like to me, it's like this is a messaging device. This is not a phone, right? But to the older generation, it's a phone, right? And so when you think about the different kind of even channels you offer in a contact center, the younger generation is perfectly happy having financial conversations and financial discussions completely over a device.
Yeah.
They don't want to talk to somebody. And it was interesting. I was having a conversation as we were trying to deploy messaging and things like that with one of the contact center leaders. And she had a teenager. And we were discussing like doing a lot of more stuff via chat and messaging. And she's like, no, they want phone. I'm like, you have a 15-year-old. Go ask her to call somebody. Like she would flip out. Exactly. Right. And so it's like having those kind of conversations around the generational differences is very interesting.
Yeah. And I think there's another point that you mentioned, Swapnil, and that was around, there are certain conversations that you're going to be okay with AI handling, some that you want a human in the loop, right? And that's also the state of art today. As much as we're ambitious about, majority of the conversations being handled by AI agents, and that might be true. I still do think like the ultimate workflow is going to be you have the AI agents, which are going to handle like a lot of the policy lookups, verification, simple routing, etc. But there are still going to continue to be those, complex use cases where the AI handles the verification process and then hands it over to a human agent. So majority of the workflow is designing it. I mean, the designing is no longer AI versus human. It's more, what does that handover look like to make sure that the customers are experiencing a coherent journey, right? And a lot of organizations today, they think about, okay, let's start with, automating a simpler intent or an intent which has high volume because it's going to result in cost savings. But the question that they most often underlook is the difference between complexity and the consequence. Like I can have a very simple query, but the consequence of an AI handling it could be, multifold. So, bringing that into discussion too. So I think what I'm going with this is the handover process. We know that at the end of the day, the customers, they don't want to experience different channels. They don't want to experience, so many different touch points when they're having that discussion. They want a seamless customer journey. So when we're thinking about handover, I think the question for both of you is, what does a great handover look like in practice? In theory, I think we all see a lot of definitions on, the system should not have a lot of latency, etc. But in practice, what would you say is the minimum, gold standard for handover?
Yeah, maybe I can go first, and Dan would love to hear your thoughts on how we have solved some of these problems. See, I think there's two parts to this problem. I would say one is the org structure problem, and then the second is the product and the technical problem. And I feel like the org structure problem is far more worse than the product and technical problem. So let me tell you about what I mean. So when customer service used to be primarily voice, right? And then we started adding this digital channel. And what most companies did were they would have a contact center team, which is more voice team, and then they would have a separate digital team. And what that did was this digital team will completely in isolation start building the digital customer service channels. And then the voice team, which was managing contact center, was completely owning the contact center and the voice. So now as a consumer, I come on your website and I'm doing something on chat. I tell you, hey, my bill is very high. I don't understand why this line item is on my bill. And maybe I'm the problem is not resolved. I call your contact center, I start talking to an agent, and guess what? That agent has zero understanding, zero history of that digital conversation. And that is because the org structure was designed in a way where digital is a completely isolated experience than the voice channel. And we see that again and again. So when people talk about, and then we invented this new word of omni-channel with the goal that no, let's combine. But my first question is, why did we start them separate? Why was a digital team completely separate than the voice team? Because your customers don't think of it this way. When I talk to one of my brands, I don't think of them as org structure. I think of them as one brand, one experience. So now this problem I'm seeing happen again with AI agents, and it's very concerning. So today, what's happening is you have a human team, a human contact center team, and then now these enterprises to build out their AI agents, they have an AI agents team. And guess what? That is completely isolated and separate from the human team. So what's going to happen now? I call in, I talk to an AI agent. If it resolves my problem, great. If there's a handover, there's a very high chance I will be put back in the queue. I'll go through some routing. I land up in some agent's queue. The agent will talk to me and act like nothing has happened. And I'm like, I just spoke to your AI agent. I gave all the information. I am authenticated. How many times has this happened with us? Where when we are transferred between departments in a call center, we have to repeat everything. And that is an org structure problem because they don't want to talk to each other. There are no systems talking to each other. They have separate leaders, separate goals, separate metrics. So I'm actually starting to get concerned that the same thing is happening with this. So AI agents team are separate. They are doing their own thing. And then the human team is separate. They are doing their own thing. And the problem the consumers will have with this is now I'm going to have isolated experiences, disconnected experiences. There's a very high chance, by the way, that the policies both of them will follow will be different. So there's a high chance that my AI agent will give me one answer. When I go to the human agent, I'll get a different answer. Guess why? Org structures. They have the AI agent team have created their own knowledge bases, own FAQs, own things. So I think it's a pretty big problem in my mind when I think about, and it's an org structure problem. So that's one.
Yeah.
Second, I think the technology and product problem, right? You do want to treat you always want to think of not as AI versus human because that's your internal view. You have to always think of the customer view. Customer does not care. I don't care your which org you are in, which VP this team reports to. You are sitting in US or Manila, or I don't care. For me, you're a brand and I expect a consistent experience. So what you want to have is make sure the tools that are being used for your AI agents are the same or very deeply connected to the tools that your human agents are using. And there's a seamless handover whenever there's a transfer from AI to human with all the context to your point, verification was completed. I collected all the information of the problem. I proposed these resolutions. And here's a summary of everything that has happened. So there's a continuity in the customer experience and not like, hey, Dan, I know you spent 5 minutes with the AI agent. I don't have any context. Let's start again. And Dan is like, wait, what? So that's sort of like how I view the handover problem. It is a two-part problem for me. And org problem is much bigger than the technology problem.
Yeah, and you already answered this. My follow-up question was going to be, what's going to be that minimum context package that needs to be transferred from an AI agent to a human so the customer is not stuck in that loop of, repeating themselves?
Yeah, I would love for to hear Dan's thoughts on this
Yeah.
problem because you have seen this happen. I mean, I'm sure like with the digital channel, this was everywhere. So curious
Yeah.
how the companies are thinking this new divide between AI agents and human agents.
Yeah, no, I've definitely seen this happen, and it's happened both digital and live. And one of the things that was a huge thing when I went from Apple to eBay, we talked quite a bit about as we were scaling up digital was that end-to-end experience. I always talk about it as seamless channel shift. Nothing's worse, and everyone experienced this for years with their credit card company. You call up the IVR, you punch in your credit card number, you get to a person, what's the first thing they ask? Can I have your credit card number? No, I just gave it to you, right? And so, one of the big things we did is when we deployed our first chatbot in 2017, was we were very clear is anything they did with the chatbot, if they had to escalate, and we had to escalate 70% of the things, right? If you had to escalate, right? You were not repeating anything. We made sure we gave full visibility transcript. We put a little bit of a summary, we'll call it, right, as much as we could at that point to the teammate, right, to the agent, into the contact center because we didn't want the customer to have to start from scratch. And we carried that through as we got to AI. That was one of the first things we did with Gen AI in the contact center was a summary of what the bot conversation was, so that when they got that, the first thing they saw was a summary of what happened in the conversation, so they didn't have to read through the conversation. We even did that when we first deployed back when I was at Apple, when we first deployed messaging. with iMessage is we took and we said we allowed with SMS we allowed up to 3 little bubbles to be selected by the first person to say, okay, these are the most important 3 little snippets that the second person who gets it, because as you know, with messaging, the same person is not going to get it, right? Because it's an asynchronous kind of communication. We allowed them to tag up to 3 so the next person got it, didn't have to read through the whole thread, right? So that importance of that continuity was extremely important. I think to your point about org design, I think it's extremely important as we think about AI agents, and it was a conversation we had very recently. So as you know, I only left eBay at the end of last year, and they are in the midst of deploying AI agents right now. And we had the conversation around that ownership, and the model that we put together was very clear on who owns what part of the agent, and the way we talked about AI agents and the way we talked about it was an AI agent is just another employee, right? And just like you would hire an agent in the contact center, when you hire an AI agent, you need to give it the same things you would give an employee: a job description, a manager, right? Complete coaching, right? All of those things, a quality program, all of those things. So clear ownership of that AI agent. And the way we talked about it was, in practice, what does it look like is product owns the intent, why the agent exists, what problem it solves, where the authority ends. Engineering owns reliability, security, latency, grounding, safe failure modes. Excuse me. Legal, risk, boundaries, compliance, decision constraints, right? Leadership owns alignments, trade-offs, all those kind of things. But operations, they own the manager role: knowledge, quality, QA, coaching, and feedback, just like they do of the humans, right? And so they own, it's a worker, just like they do of the human agents. And that way you have that consistency of, doesn't matter to the customer whether they're talking to an AI giving them an answer or to a human giving them the answer, the same person owns that outcome. Because if you let a product team own the outcome of an AI agent, that's not the right thing to do. And so we were very clear of, you're not going to hire a human agent without a manager. Why would you hire an AI agent without a manager? And that was the way we talked about it there, was that's the way you should treat an AI agent. You still need technology behind it. You still need product behind it. You still need all of the other things, but you should treat it just like you're hiring another person. You're just doing it at a bigger scale.
Another blog idea, Dan.
Yeah, there's so much good content that we can repurpose, but so I have a lot of follow-up questions. I'll because of time I'll keep it to 1 or 2. I think the first follow-up question that I have around this is, we're talking so much about the handoff and making the entire experience seamless, but we also need to keep in mind that there's always going to be a segment of customers who will want to speak to a human agent regardless, right? And so how are we deciding how much control should customers have in this workflow now? Like, should they be able to demand, a human immediately? Or what is that? Because I think there's a lot of trade-off. If we're looking at, automating or cost reduction, etc., and then we're also allowing for humans to instantly, for customers to instantly get access to humans, there's going to be a trade-off on that cost, on that experience. So how are we thinking about, the control that customers are going to have?
Dan, I mean, you work with some of the best brands, right? The most customer
Yeah.
obsessed brands. So curious to hear how they think, and I'll obviously share my perspective on what I hear from other customers.
So, sometimes in a regulated industry, you have to, right? Outside of that, I think it's going to depend on what your customer value model is. I always say, yes, you should let them, right? Now, there are some that it's not worth it, depending on what your customer model is, right? If you're, low value customers, if it's not worth it, I always think you should give the customer the choice. If they don't feel like they're getting their answer, or, if they're frustrated in the AI experience, they've gone round and round them 3 times, right? You should let them out, right? They shouldn't get frustrated. At eBay, we let them immediately. If they got into the bot and they didn't want, they could immediately say, talk to an agent. We let them out right away. That was just the model. And that was the choice. It's a very customer focused organization. Same thing at Apple. We would let them out. And so it really depends on your organization. I don't feel you should ever force anybody into an AI experience if you're a customer-focused company.
Yeah, I think there's even a regulation that has come out in some states where you have to tell the customer that this is an AI and they have an option to get out of it or something like that. I have to look up. Yeah, it's actually real, right? Where I mean, we want consumers to have the choice. So from a consumer rights perspective, let's say, right, there's an argument to be had, which is, well, I signed up for this experience and you're giving me this experience. But yeah, doubling down on kind of like what Dan said, right? This is what I hear from most of our customers, right? I mean, we all understand that the products we all provide and products that most companies provide, right? There is very little differentiation in them. And the differentiation is in the service layer, right? The experience layer. So we hear the more and more actually that customers are very willing. I mean, enterprises are very willing and very open to letting their consumers decide if they want to talk to AI or a human. I even have spoken to a customer, a very large travel company, who, in fact, at the front of their IVR would say, "Hey, welcome to so and so. Let me know if you want to talk to an AI or a human." And to our point, but there's a caveat. If you want to talk to a human, there's a 20-minute wait time, and or we can call you back. If you want to talk to an AI and if you feel like a problem could be resolved very quickly, I can get you an AI right now. What do you want? So I mean, because there's trade-offs, right? One is costly, would take time, other is fast, right? So you kind of give the choice back to the consumer in saying, okay, my problem is silly. I can just use an AI to get it done. Well, my problem is complex and I really need to talk to a human. So I think you kind of let them make the choice. But broadly, I think if I were to use a broad paint brush on this, right? It's more and more customers want to give their consumers the choice to talk to a human because that's the differentiation, and they don't want to spoil that experience for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I did have another question, and this was specifically around what you mentioned, Dan, and that was you talked a little bit about the ownership, right, of the decisions that these AI agents make. Talked about product being one owner. You talked about the quality, the managers. So my question now is, if we have so many different departments which are taking ownership of like different workflows, at what point does it go from, everybody owning it to nobody owning anything?
Well, people own different parts of it, right? People are responsible for extreme. You have to be very clear on who owns what part of it. Like I said, product owns the intent of the agent, why the agent exists, what problem it solves, where the authority ends, right? Engineering owns reliability, security, latency, grounding, safe failure mode. So it's very clear on who owns what part of it. So you put together the RACI, responsible, approved, right? For each part of it. And so if it breaks, you know who's responsible for what part of it, right? If it gave the wrong answer and it was the wrong answer because knowledge base was wrong, that's operations fault, right? If it's not fast enough or not reliable enough, that's engineering's fault, right? And so you just make very clear on who owns what part of it, right? And so that way, depending on where it breaks, you can very clearly say, here's who owns this thing, right? Because if you don't document that well, if you don't put that clearly, right, document it well, then to your point, well, it's broken. I don't know who to go call, right? I don't know who to go talk to. It just doesn't work, right? You have to be very clear on who owns what part of it and what their responsibility is. Otherwise, nobody owns it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked about, the decision matrix. We've talked about the handover process, a little bit about the ownership. I think now that I want to move into a different section, and that kind of brings all of this together, right? So we understand that the goal is a unified customer journey. Now, a system that determines whether this is going to stick at scale is usually quality. Now, we know traditionally quality is a big piece driving performance management in contact centers. I think for me personally, over the past few weeks, I've just been going down this rabbit hole where I'm confused about what the future of quality is going to look like, right? So for me, the tension is, do we bypass quality and go straight from insight to action-led workflows? Or does QA become even more critical now because it's the incentive system that actually changes the agent behavior, right? So the new unit, I think, is clear for us on quality. That's customer journey. But the question for me now is, how do we audit inside that journey, right? When that work is split between an agent, an AI agent, and a human. So, Dan, I would like you to, get started on this conversation. And then Swapnil, I also want to hear what you think about the future of quality.
Yeah, I think, real quickly, I think it's more important than ever to continue down that quality path, even though it's at the journey, because the journey is made up of moments. And those moments are delivered either by an AI or by a person. And so if you're not still having that those understanding of what moments made up that journey and trying to fix those moments, it doesn't matter if you're looking at the overall journey, you've got to fix the moments and you've got to be able to do that. The benefit of the systems that are out there today, like an Observe.AI, is you can look at all the moments, right? It's no longer the, hey, I'm only looking at 3 per person per month, right? You can now do it, and you can now have the overall, like, and you can say, okay, here's the behavioral patterns you're seeing, either in a person or the things that are going wrong in an AI agent. You can do that at scale now. And that's the benefit that comes with now looking at journeys, but you still have to look at the moments that make up the journey. It doesn't get you away from a quality program. It actually makes the quality program that much more important because now you know what's going on in your journeys and how to address your journeys.
Yeah, I think funny enough, I literally had a conversation with the vice president at a large healthcare company today morning, and they were talking about how last year for them, he described it in a pretty nice way, which is like, the three phases of AI agents. One is you're tinkering, you're kind of like just doing demos. Second is you're doing pilot. And then as after pilot, as they're trying to put that in production, he's actually most worried about monitoring and quality. He's like putting it in production and it having, hundreds of thousands of calls a day is easy. But what I would not know is how were those conversations? Were they good? How was the customer experience? Did we have compliance issues? Did we follow the process? Did we follow the policy? Right. So I think it's also the cycle of something, right? Cycle of quality always comes once you have built something, right? And I think most organizations are still in the first legs of building AI agents. And then once they start putting in production, and they're like, oh shit, now how do I monitor? And then once these AI agents, by definition, they're LLM and they're heuristic based, they start causing issues. The quality, the expectation of quality will keep coming more and more. And we have seen this. We have seen with these companies, we worked with a lot of modern, forward-looking tech companies. And we saw this last year. All those companies were early in the cycle of implementing AI agents. And as they implement it, all of them use our Observe.AI conversation intelligence platform to actually also QA the AI agent conversation. So we get the full journey now, to Dan's point. We not only get like the human journey, but we get the full conversation. So we get like, hey, here's the AI, here is the human. And then if the conversation is let's say on a case, let's say, multi-day, then you're like, hey, again a human and again an AI, and here's an email and here's a chat, right? So we get the full context of the customer journey and the customer conversation. And then we get to QA the whole thing
Mm.
versus a disconnected. And this again goes back to the org problem. If companies think of it as my AI agent is doing well, my human agent is doing well, that's flawed. You have to reverse and ask the question, how is your customer doing? Because people often, look at this internally and say, hey, my AI agent did this well. And the ops team will say, my human agents are doing well. And then if you ask, the team that manages the customer experience or the CEO, and they're like, my customer experience sucks.
Yeah.
So two big parts. Like one, more and more you will see customer journey QA and not just QA of one piece of the leg, which is human or AI. And second, you will see this increase now more as people start deploying these AI agents in production. And again, you want to use one system to monitor QA, audit your AI, your human, and the full journey to get a full picture. Because your customers, again, do not care which org manages AI agent, which org manages human agent, or which org manages chat, which they don't care. For them, you're one company, one brand, and one experience.
Yeah. So outside of, the things that are already measured, right? Like even if it's an AI agent, they're looking at resolution, deflection, all of that. What do you think are some additional dimensions that are going to get added as part of this quality process that haven't, been looked at historically?
Yeah, Dan, would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think customer effort is the big one. right? The normal like resolution, satisfaction kind of things, the effort, how hard was it for the customer, especially as you toss these AI agents in there, right? It's like, a lot of people are looking at that containment, especially as you throw those chatbots out there. It's like, yeah, they may have been contained, but only because we frustrated them so much that they couldn't get through to a person, right? And so I think how much effort there was is one of the things we did on the digital side at eBay is we changed from satisfaction to customer effort because it was important to us to say, yeah, great. 92% of people were not going through our contact center. But what was the effort? And that was the important part for us, was to make sure we weren't just frustrating the people, we were actually getting them an answer. And it was true. We were actually getting them the answer. So we were truly solving 92% of the customers' issues. And so that's an important thing as we look at those journeys. You look at those journeys is what's the effort for the customer to get through that? Have you just frustrated them and made it harder, or is it actually you're giving them great experiences with an AI, and making them lower effort?
I think, yeah, just to add to that, I think it will be very similar things what we have done for the human. The AI agent follow the process. The AI provide a great experience, resolution, not just containment. I think containment is often seen as, oh, the caller just hung up, or the caller disconnected, and it did not get handed over to a human agent, so that is success, and that's a pretty bad metric. You want resolution and you want satisfaction. But I think there's the other element of, let's call it the AI-ish things that will need to come in, things like hallucination, things like guardrails measurement, things like tool calling accuracy, things like steps adherence, right? Because when you create an AI agent, you're defining all the steps. Did the AI agent adhere to those steps, right? So there's a world of what I call as like it's less about customer experience. So you're not changing what you are measuring on the customer experience side. You're measuring more on the internal execution of the AI agent. I think Dan also referred to some of those. We call things like latency metrics, utterance metrics, right? How interruption metrics, because now AI is still learning, right, how to handle interruptions. So, how soon after the human started, the customer started interrupting the AI agent, did it stop? Things like these come in, which you generally won't measure for your human agents.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful. So if quality is going to become more critical now than ever, then it takes me into the next portion, and that is, for quality to be successful, for it to stick at scale, you need to prevent inconsistencies in knowledge between, your humans and AI agents. And so, Dan, with, all the experiences you've had in the past around designing these systems, I think my question for you is, how do you keep knowledge consistent over time, especially in situation when policies change pretty quickly, right? That's one. Two is, what should be like the operating cadence? Say, there is a policy change. Who is governing, how the humans and AI agents respond to it? What SLAs are we looking at? Who's running that correction loop?
One knowledge base. There's not two knowledge bases. That was the key for us. There's two big things we did. One was, as we started to deploy AI and bots, was we took the content and we broke it down into what we took from articles to we call them Q&A pairs. It was no longer an article, right? As you think about eBay, no one calls up eBay and I have a question all about bidding and buying, which was the name of the article, right? I have a question about how do I cancel a bid, right? I just won the bid. What's the next step? So we broke it down to question answer pairs, because that works for not only the human agent, but that works for the bot as well. And so we then had one set of content that we could use for both the AI and for the human, right? And then we could just keep that content updated. And so that was the key for us, was one set of content. Now it got displayed differently, whether it was used in the IVR, whether it was used for the bot, whether it was used for the human, right? Or used on the website. But the base of it was one set of content. And we made sure we rewrote that content in the way that was used for whichever medium. But you have to have one set of content. Otherwise, you're going to get out of sync, because that policy update is going to come in. You're going to have two different teams writing it. The words are going to be different, because when a human's looking at it, they're going to put their interpretation of the words they're reading. AI is going to look at it and go, yep, that's exactly what it says. That's exactly what I'm going to do. So if you're not using the same content, you're asking for trouble.
Yeah. I think the challenge that I've seen, I would again go back to one of the org problem, right? Who owns knowledge? Often I've seen the teams who are creating AI agents, they start defining their own knowledge. Second big problem that's happening in the current AI agent frameworks right now is the framework themselves embed a lot of knowledge in them. So what I mean by that is, let's say, you're creating an AI agent for refund. I'll use e-commerce company, right? And you end up to create the agent, you end up writing the policy in the agent itself. So whatever agent platform you're using, you would say, if the customer calls in regarding the refund, check the order date, check this, and if so, allow them to return the product within 30 days, right? And now imagine like your core knowledge system is somewhere else that's being referred by your human agents. So now, because a lot of the current AI agent frameworks almost embed knowledge within them, there is a situation of the knowledge diverging. Because now you have to come every time you make a change to your core knowledge, let's say the main knowledge system or policy, you have to go and find out where all it was referenced in my AI agent architecture. So that's a big problem we are seeing happen right now, right? So our guidance to customers is make sure that you do not embed or write or copy paste your knowledge in the AI agent framework. The AI agents should refer to it. So think of it as the same thing you would tell a human agent, do not memorize the policies. If you memorize, then even if you change the knowledge bases, they're not reading it because it's in their memory. Same thing with AI agents. If you hard code it in the AI agents themselves, they will not refer to the knowledge bases. So this is a very common thing we are seeing where people are trying to decouple both of them. That AI agents should look at the core knowledge base and not copy paste inside them. If you copy paste, then you have like two copies of it, and then they will start diverging, and then you will start providing inconsistent experience to your customers.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens in the contact center. Every agent has their own Microsoft OneNote of all their snippets. No, you can't do that because they change. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if we've identified, the different owners and what the governance structure needs to look like, then who owns remediation if something goes wrong?
For AI agents or
Yeah,
for human agents?
for AI agents, yeah, let's keep it there because I think right now the biggest concern is the AI agents, doing something that is out of policy, right? I
I'm
think
still a believer of like it should be the person who owns the customer experience.
Yeah.
So VP of customer experience, VP of customer support, right? They are leveraging technology, which is AI agents, but I think at the end of the day, they are responsible for customer experience, and they are the ones who have to make sure the AI agents do what they're supposed to do, the experience is good, the policies are correct, the no hallucinations, all sorts of things.
Okay, yeah. I know we're almost at time. I do want to give, a chance to both Dan, you and Swapnil to just summarize or any key takeaway that you have for the audience. But from my end, I think we've gone through a lot of different topics, right? We've gone through the decision framework, the handoff principles, governance, ownership. We've gone through, how much control customers should have, what does the different deployment model look like? So I think it's a lot of information for the audience to think through, to digest. But is there anything else that you want the audience to take away from this discussion today, Dan?
Yeah, I just think about it a lot before you deploy. Put the a lot of things we talked about, the ownership, the decision rights. Put the thoughts down before you deploy. Don't wait till you get it out there because it will come back to bite you very quickly.
Yeah, I think my thought will be design your org structure in a way that supports one customer journey and not disconnected, isolated experience. Your customers think of you as one company, one brand, one experience, and you don't want to expose your internal issues or internal divides or internal org structure to them. They don't care about it. So keep that in mind as you design the customer experience between AI and humans.
Yeah, that's so for the audience, that's the operating mantra for, designing your 2030 CX vision. It's not just choose one over the other. A lot of the points that Dan and Swapnil talked about, you need to balance all of those out. So with that, Swapnil, Dan, thank you so much for taking the time to, have this discussion with us today. And Dan, really appreciate you for, sharing your expertise with the audience here. We're pretty sure there are going to be a lot of questions, follow-up questions, and if the opportunity provides, we would love to bring you back on. And Swapnil, thank you so much for being my co-host today, and thank you to the audience for taking the time to tune into this discussion. We'll see you next month.
Thank you. Thanks, Neha. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.